Starting on a Wednesday is Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Mr. Secretary.
Thanks for having me on. Great to be with you. Let's
start with bridges. And I have one to suggest to you. Joe Biden said today that there's going to be this top 10 bridges. It's going to be a competition, actually. The states are going to have to apply to say this is a crucially important bridge as defined by Joe Biden. And we'll see who gets the funding for those most important 10 bridges. You might want to think about the Brent Spence Bridge, which I think, as you know, connects Kentucky with Cincinnati, Ohio. Covington, Kentucky, Cincinnati, Ohio. Kentucky, of course, the home state of a senator named McConnell. Ohio, the home state of a senator named Portman. And maybe you can soften up Republican resistance to this bill if that bridge is on the list.
I can tell you I've gotten an earful about the importance of that bridge from folks on both sides of the aisle. I just heard from Senator Brown about that and spoke to Governor Beshear today. And this is an example of the massive infrastructure needs we have in the country. So if we get this bill passed, this is certainly an example of a project that should apply for that support. And I do want to emphasize, as the president did, that in addition to these 10 bridges of major economic significance that we got to take care of, there's also a proposal for funding to deal with thousands of bridges that we know need support, many of them in places like where I come from in Indiana and really every part of this country. And whether we're talking about bridges or roads and highways, whether we're talking about ports or airports, rail or transit, we know that there's a demonstrated need in this country to do a lot to go big. And that's what this plan does. For once, it really is Infrastructure Week. And I think we're going to open up an infrastructure season that will make for a better life in this country if Congress is prepared to follow the president's lead and deliver on this important priority.
You are personally going to be spending a lot of time in the Senate and the House testifying about this bill. Senate Finance Committee has jurisdiction over the tax pieces, and in the Senate, the Infrastructure Committee is actually called the Environment and Public Works Committee, and I was the staff director of that committee before Finance. And what was always odd about it in those days is that we had environmental staffers over on one section of the office, and we had public works staffers on another section of the office, and they never talked to each other, because the two things never had anything to do with each other. And finally, it seems to me, in the legislation you've drafted, the very title of that committee finally makes sense: Environment and Public Works. When I see some of the elements of this infrastructure bill that normally would be handled by the infrastructure team, the environmental team up there is going to be very interested in these pieces also.
That's right. You know, this package recognizes that the two can't be separated from each other. Look, the truth is every infrastructure decision we make is also an environmental decision. Transportation is the single biggest contributor to greenhouse gases in the economy, which to me means we get to be the biggest part of the solution. But that means that every transportation choice is a choice about our climate future. And the best thing about this is that this is where we get to prove out what the president has been insisting on, which is that the time has come to break the old false choice of climate versus jobs. This is job creation through good infrastructure investments that are also going to be good for the climate. They go hand in hand, and it's time we recognize that in our policy.
So the president is charging you with getting through a $2 trillion, no, wait a minute, it's more than that. This bill is now at what level is it now, Mr. Secretary, in funding?
Yeah, it's north of $2 trillion now, including $621 billion specifically for transportation infrastructure. That will be my focus. And not to get too technical, but I want to mention that that's sitting on top of the kind of regular process for more routine transportation work that we've got to do in Congress.
Okay, so you're at $2 trillion, numbers we never dealt with in the Senate when I was there. And in the previous hour, I just heard Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez tell Rachel where she thinks this number should be. So fasten your seatbelt and let's listen to what number she thinks you should be working on.
What we think is the actual investment that can create tens of millions of good union jobs in this country that can shore up our healthcare, our infrastructure, our housing, and doing it in a way that draws down our carbon emissions to help us get in line with the IPCC standards, we're talking about realistically $10 trillion over 10 years.
And Mr. Secretary, I urge you to watch the rerun of that show if you haven't seen it already, to listen to the full case that she makes about this, because she does make a serious case. What's your response to that?
Well, we are talking about the biggest jobs package in America since World War II. This is truly a generational investment and a transformative investment. But I'm certainly glad to hear that there's a shared appetite for going big, because this is not a moment that we can approach in a routine kind of way. This is a moment that I believe calls to mind those moments when America had a choice to make. Most recently, probably when we had the interstate highway system under Eisenhower. If you want to go back to one before that, probably the moment of the Transcontinental Railroad under Lincoln. And before that even, the Erie Canal, which sounded like a pie-in-the-sky idea at the time and wound up actually being one of the decisions, an infrastructure decision that actually helped make the United States into truly one country. That's the kind of moment in front of us. And look, the president laid out a clear vision and a big vision, but is open to hearing ideas from every corner of our party and the other party, too, if they have good ideas they want to bring to the table.
Secretary Buttigieg, you would have instantly won over the former chairman of the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, when I was working there, simply with the reference to the Erie Canal. That would have locked up his vote for anything you want. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, thank you very much for starting off Infrastructure Week with us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.